Good morning, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us online today. My name is Stefaan Bruce-Truglio, and I'm the Senior Policy and Advocacy Officer at Youth First Council of WA. My pronouns are he, him, and I'll be your MC today. I'd just like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land in which I'm coming to you from today, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and pay my respects to elders past and present, and also celebrate and acknowledge emerging young Aboriginal leaders in the community. And also acknowledge the traditional custodians of any of the lands in which you all may be coming to us from today. So YACWA is delighted to partner with Shelter and the WA Alliance to End Homelessness to bring you this exciting opportunity to hear how approaches to ending youth homelessness are being done outside Australia. And we're really excited to have Ashley Barnes-Cocke from the Anchor Community Initiative at WAAEH, Washington, to talk about what they're doing in Washington. And we will be having Michaela McMahon, who's the Director of Practice and Improvement at the WA Alliance to End Homelessness, and also the Manager for the Advanced to Zero project, will be interviewing Ashley. Following this, we'll be having a brief update from Jacqui, who's the Executive Director of the Office of Homelessness at the Department of Communities, and myself, who will be providing a brief update from YACWA and the projects that we have coming up. So before I pass on to Michaela to talk to Ashley, I just let you all know that this meeting is being recorded, and we will be sharing it more widely for anyone who wasn't able to attend today following this meeting. And we'll also be having a short time for questions following the interview. So please use the chat to post your questions, and we'll be monitoring it so we can hopefully get a few of them answered. So I would just like to pass on to Michaela to introduce and tell us a bit more about Ashley, and then we'll be having a chat.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Stefaan, and welcome everyone. I'm really excited about today's chat. I've been speaking to Ashley for a little while now and following what the Away Home project in Washington are doing. So I'm excited to share that learning with everybody else. So I'd just like to introduce Ashley. So Ashley Barnes-Cocke goes by the pronouns of they, them, and is the project director of the Anchor Community Initiative at Away Home Washington, which is an organisation that's dedicated to building a state where every young person is able to access the services that they need and want quickly without having to leave their home in the community, resulting in stable housing. So Ashley has worked in youth development and in youth homelessness programmes for the best part of a decade, which is a long time in youth work, and is an expert in centering young people with lived experience in strategic and system design. So welcome, Ashley. I'm just going to dive straight into the first question, because that will give you an opportunity to tell everybody a little bit about you and what the Anchor Community and Away Home project is all about. So can you tell us a little bit about the background of Away Home Washington and its statewide movement, and the purpose, why and how it came about?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Michaela. And I also just want to acknowledge that I am sitting on the lands of the Coast Salish and Duwamish peoples here in Washington. Me and Michaela were joking a little bit about it's WAAEH over here that we're doing today. And so I'm really excited and grateful that you all asked me to come here. So yeah, I've been in youth work for a while. Most of that time has been in Washington State. And so I have a little bit of a window into the history before Away Home Washington had come here. And there's a lot of reasons that our state is uniquely positioned to be centering and championing youth homelessness in particular as a cause, separate and distinct from other populations. We have a state level Office of Homeless Youth that was formed in 2015, along with a number of youth and young adult specific focused advocacy organizations, including one that specifically is a statewide organization and organizes foster youth and young people who've experienced homelessness to advocate at the state level for system changes. That organization started in 2000. There's a number of different advocacy groups focused on foster care and youth homelessness and the intersections of the two, which has created a really ripe ground for Washington State in particular to have this opportunity with creating the Office of Homeless Youth. And Away Home Washington was formed in 2016 out of a need to lead some new strategy that brings together the effort to learn on the ground what it takes to truly end youth homelessness in communities and leverage those learnings to remove system barriers across the state. And I think it's really interesting when you look at homelessness systems, a lot of times there's like a lot of local authority to be able to make some decisions and then some federal authority, at least in the United States. And it's not very often that the state can have a big lever for change, but in our state that really is the case because of the leadership of the Office of Homeless Youth. And Away Home Washington, as it was formed, was really out of a need to partner with the Office of Homeless Youth. There was this new office, and we needed to have a public-private partnership to be able to really amplify and test things that the state can't necessarily just test immediately on its own, but to be able to work together for the organization to be able to like nimbly work with communities on the ground and leverage those learnings into system change. Like you said, Michaela, our organization, our vision is that we want a Washington State where every young person can access the services they need and want quickly without having to leave their home community and see them stably housed as a result. And when young people raise up their hand and they say, yes, I need help, we want communities to be able to say, yes, we have what you actually need. And we call that yes to yes. And we have like lots of things like yes to yes plan, like how can we say yes to young people instead of like, why can't we make this happen? It's really kind of our mantra. And I think it's also important to note that our definition of youth homelessness includes young people that are unsafely and unstably doubled up in couch surfing, along with young people who are unsheltered, staying in shelter, fleeing violence, in time-limited living situations, all of those things. And the program that I run, the Anchor Community Initiative, is our largest, our flagship program, and we support 9 communities across Washington State to make progress towards building a quality real-time by name list and use that information to drive system improvements that result in a homelessness response that is closer and closer to being what young people actually need. And so we put special emphasis on centering young people with lived experience in decision making, especially because, you know, when you look at the data can tell you what is happening, but young people can tell you why it's happening, along with service providers and bringing that expertise. We also really center an emphasis on ending disproportionality for youth of color, LGBTQ, and trans and non-binary young people. Specifically, we don't feel like our work is done until those populations, all populations of young people, are getting a similar experience and being housed equitably out of our homelessness system. If we see that somebody's, you know, like our system-wide average is a 30 days till housing that people are experiencing across the board. If trans young people, it takes 60 days. We don't think that is good enough. We think we still have work to do.
We're going to dig a little bit deeper into that a little bit later on, Ashley, but can I just ask around, like, what are the crucial elements, do you think, of Away Home, and what or who did you need around the table to get things started?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we were very lucky, like I said, to have this really close partnership with the Office of Homeless Youth. And we also have a really close relationship with the First Lady of Washington State, Trudy Inslee. So she's the governor's wife, and she has championed youth and young adult homelessness as kind of her core issue. And so she goes to the legislature and testifies on our behalf to be able to rally resources for anchor communities and lots of those types of things, along with a slate of funders that really have taken this issue up and really care about moving the needle on youth homelessness in particular. And one thing that I'll say about this is when we were building out this strategy, a really important consideration was that our systems of care partners, so schools, juvenile detention, the foster care system, the behavioral health system, our tribal partners that do a lot of work to create community, to support their communities on the ground. we needed to figure out a way that we could leverage those partnerships that exist on the ground and encourage our anchor communities to develop those partnerships, but also maintain those partnerships on the state level. So we have a MOU with the Department of Child Welfare, and we have our close relationship with the Office of Homeless Youth. We have regular communication. I had a call with the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, who oversees the homeless support services for the state of Washington in their schools, and all those kinds of things. And the reality of what that is able to do for us is that when somebody on the ground is trying to create a solution to being able to have like a referral partnership, a data sharing agreement, like some kind of thing that is going to allow for them to work with their child welfare system and make sure young people are not exiting that system into homelessness, and they run into any kind of barrier or problem, then I can go to the people at the state level, or executive director can go to people at the state level to be able to talk about like, okay, why is this an issue? What does the rule actually say? Can we massage it? We're both on the same page. We both share an aim, like we want to do this together. Like we want the same thing here. How can we figure out a solution to this problem for this community to be able to try something? And so I think that systems of care piece from the jump has been really important to us, because when you're talking about youth homelessness in particular, young people who are experiencing a lot of the same things can get caught by different systems, the child welfare system, the homelessness system, only be identified at school, any of those kinds of things. And then I also think it's really important to have young people with lived experience at the table in any of these conversations. So when Away Home Washington was forming, that was also kind of a key component of building our plan, was ensuring that young people with lived experience, and many of our staff also have lived experience, are able to be a part of that strategic planning that is happening.
That's wonderful, amazing, thank you. So what was the state of youth homelessness prior to the movement commencing? And what reductions have you seen so far, and how are you measuring those reductions?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in this question. I don't think that it will be super surprising to anybody here, but the biggest issue is really not understanding the scope of youth homelessness in our state and in our community. Really, everybody is kind of guessing. And when you don't know the scope of something, a few things I think tend to happen that I've seen, I've experienced as a service provider as well. We start to talk about like lots of trends that really there's no way to know if that is actually what the problem is. So a lot of the tenor of kind of explanations that we give are, in the vein of why things can't get better or why it's not that bad, that they're getting worse. So in the US, we have a point in time count. I don't know if that's a thing in Australia, but it's one night. They go around and have volunteers count everyone, and everybody every year is like, the number went up. That's actually a good thing because we're counting people better. And that might be true, but you don't know. And I never know if that's actually true. It's just a thing that we say. Obviously the number went up because we're counting better. I would love to know more than that, about exactly what it is. And that isn't really linked to any kind of system improvement at all, when we're kind of making those conversations like that. And then the other thing that I see a lot is like, we're trying to solve theoretical problems around theoretical young people. We're talking about things that may very well be important a lot of the time, but the conversations kind of become like, well, unsheltered young people often have X, Y, and Z experience. And so this intervention just wouldn't work for them. But it's so different. I was just in Walla Walla, one of our communities the other day. We were mapping out what their emergency response to and finding an unsheltered young person in their community is, because their number they've reduced it so much. And I can show some of that information soon, but they've reduced it so much that they're talking about like, okay, Cindy, John, and Taylor, like we can talk about if hotel vouchers like work for unsheltered young people, but actually it's so different when you can say like, would they work for Cindy, John, and Taylor? Those actual individuals who kind of get subsumed when we're talking about like in generalizations about people. Then you can really, really target and tailor what we're talking about if we actually like know the young people. And so we support our communities to create a quality by name list, which I'm sure many of you have heard about. This is the by name list scorecard that we use. I dropped it in the chat. I don't know if everybody can see it. But it's also on our ACI resource hub. And that is all of the young people disconnected from their families and experiencing homelessness by our definition from ages 12 to 24. And so if communities say yes to all of these questions, then for us, what it shows is that they have the relationships, the policies, and the infrastructure to be confident that a vast majority of young people that need to be connected with the homelessness system are being connected with the homelessness system, and that they can trust the data, the communities can trust the data to be able to show them areas of improvement and show them if something is working or not. So like if the number is going down, we can be confident that it's not random chance, or if it's going up, we can be confident that there's something in our system that is causing that, not just a lack of information. And so our scorecard is tailored to our state and some of the things that are important to us, and our specific focus on youth voice and creating just systems, and lots of those kinds of things. So it's slightly different than the Community Solutions Zero for All, Built for Zero scorecard. And we really take the data very seriously. We have data coaches that support the communities. We have a lot of custom data tools that we use to help them track progress. And the kind of bread and butter of that, if I can show you all, I'm going to show you all our dashboard, one of our dashboards. We have a bunch of Tableau dashboards, a bunch of different resources, some that I can show you, some that I can't. But we're able to look at communities' progress, and we can do really cool things like show exactly where their improvement median is. This is like baseline functioning of their system and like what is happening here. We can filter by, well, let's see if it works. We can filter by living situation, doubled up or couch surfing, young people, all of those kinds of things. We can look at race, ethnicity. What is it looking like in the general population among white young people and youth of color? We can look at inflow and outflow, like where are people coming into the system? Where are they coming from? Where are they going? How many are going into housing placements? All of these kinds of things, like where are our housing placements, and are they consistently going up from here? So this is one way that we really closely track our progress, and it's really useful for communities because it translates something that feels very complicated in the data into something that like people can actually pinpoint and ask questions about. And young people also can look at this and pinpoint and ask questions about like, why did that increase happen this month? And be able to track and see like, okay, we did all of these things during June, July, and August of last year. What actually happened in the data set? Did it have the intended effect? And so in the past year, Walla Walla and Spokane are two communities in Washington State. The first two communities in Washington State for young people that saw measurable reductions in their overall actively homeless numbers and their unsheltered numbers. And I can also share with you all, if you're interested, the case studies that deep dive into those reductions and like why we think they all happen.
So what do you think the biggest challenge a community's faced then in prevention and how they've overcome it, Ashley?
Yeah, so it has always been clear to us in ACI that you can't just focus on housing placements. That is not going to end youth homelessness. That's not going to, in your system, outflow is only relative to inflow. And so you have to be focusing on like, how do we reduce the number of people who need the system? And it's just better for young people, better for families, better for everyone if nobody has to experience homelessness in the first place. And so, you know, we all know about homelessness prioritization and prioritizing scarce resources for the people who are the most vulnerable, which is extremely important to think about how to do that. And we try to, at Away Home Washington, like think about how we can like do prioritization and also be able to get kind of out of a scarcity mindset around some of these types of things, and really trust young people to tell us what they need, and believe them when they tell us that they have solutions. And so in a lot of our communities, they were really unable to fund a lot of prevention programs. Folks always wanted to do something else than tell young people like, you actually need to be homeless, so like call me when you are. But I think one of the major effects that happened upon becoming an anchor community is that because we have a definition that includes folks who are unsafely or unstably doubled up in couch surfing, that allowed communities to expand the definition. And because of the Office of Homeless Youth adopting that and saying like, yes, like those people for the purposes of this are eligible for the resources that like we advocate for at the state level for folks, then they were able to kind of more flexibly be able to use some of those resources and more nimbly like go where the need actually was, instead of where like we thought that it was, you know, and change things over time. And really, it's all about removing roadblocks and trusting communities and young people to know what they need. One of the most successful interventions that we have supported communities to build is our Homeless Prevention and Diversion Fund. We call it HPDF, which is not a good acronym, but we love it. HPDF is great. And it locates flexible funds in a central agency in a community, and it gets providers across the entire system, including folks from like non-traditional service providing agencies like school people, queer youth drop-ins, your mutual aid funds, like your buy and for organizations, your tribal government, like representatives and human services folks, like all people all across the system, whoever is encountering young people can get trained to directly access the fund, not go through a case manager, not make a referral. They can have the housing problem solving conversation, and they can directly access the fund on behalf of the young person. They cut the check within 72 hours and we get young people housed real fast. And so it's not a traditional diversion fund that you know is only to be used in diverting people on a entering shelter, but it's really supposed to be looking at inflow, outflow, and actively homeless, and like, how can we at any stage of this journey just say yes to young people? If any young person has a reason that they can be housed outside the system, let's not put more eligibility barriers in their way. Let's just like house them as fast as possible. And so I can also show you, we love data at Away Home Washington. And so I'm going to show you another dashboard. And it's a super cute one. This is our HPDF dashboard. And this is the last 12 months. And I'm going to change it to years. And we'll see. Yep. So we've housed 739 young people. And this is by race and ethnicity, but I want to show you living situation at entry. And so a living situation at entry, 302 folks were identified as couch surfing and doubled up in unsafe or unstable situation. And so 41% of the people that that our communities have housed, I would say, like, we developed the infrastructure, we supported them, we trained them, all those things, but it's our communities that are doing the work to house people. 41% are prevention cases and 17% are unsheltered. So when we look at, where can we find it? Processing time, 2 days. And this is like our overall run chart of like number of housing placements over time. We love to be able to like look at all of these different things. The average is around $1,500 per diversion. So $1,500 to house a young person. And all of that is extremely well spent. And so this has been one of the most useful things that communities have pointed to in terms of a prevention resource that actually works, is easy to access, it's easy for young people to be able to get what they need quickly and stay in their housing situation. The other thing about this is we also encourage folks to use it to prevent people from getting kicked out of their house. And so if we can find a way to keep families together, and actually lots of people can get housed out of one person being eligible, we encourage that, because obviously we want to keep families together. That's going to keep young people stable longer, is if they can maintain some of those family connections that are healthy and safe.
I've been talking to your colleague Kiki the other day about the diversion fund at great length, and it excites me. Some of the creative things that she was explaining that you guys have done have just been amazing, which takes me on to kind of success, I guess. So out of the communities that you support, like, what's been the most successful initiatives that you've seen, or is there a community that's doing relatively well or particularly well in reducing or ending youth homelessness?
Yes, absolutely. So Spokane, like I had said, at one point saw a 58% decrease in unsheltered homelessness between October 2020 and June 2021. And they did a lot of really cool things. Walla Walla also is on track. And I also heard that you all would like that our community is called Walla Walla because it sounds Australian. But Walla Walla is on track to be one of the first communities in the country, in the US, to end youth homelessness by reaching functional zero, including young people who are double up in couch surfing and including ending disproportionality. And their goal is to end by December 15th. And we are so excited. I was just in Walla Walla last week and it was so much fun to spend time with them talking about their unsheltered strategy, their rapid rehousing strategy. But I think across these two communities, there's some things that have been really, really impactful for them. One is Spokane saw big decreases in their unsheltered population, specifically when they started prioritizing them in case conferencing. So their case conferencing meeting just focused on that list every other week. And they had one focus on 2 weeks of the month and one focus on the other 2 weeks of the month. And they saw more success talking about unsheltered and really getting organized around what is our strategy for all of these people that we are encountering now. So that's one thing that has been really important. Both communities did a housing placement surge at one point, and so they set a short-term goal to reach a housing placement goal and pushed themselves to just house as many young people as they possibly could. Both communities did housed a huge amount of people when we did a 30 diversions of 30 days challenge, where we just kind of sent out the data and had like a little friendly competition between the communities, like who could house the most people. Walla Walla has 2 outreach navigators that basically between the 2 of them, those 2 individuals housed 34 people in 1 month, including the weekend days. So they were just, at 8 a.m. we were seeing like diversions coming in. We were like, how are you doing this? But they really wanted to win and they really housed a lot of people. And so I think surges like that have created a lot of energy for us that then, Walla Walla is an example of like a community who they were telling us before that, they were like, we don't think, the housing market is really bad. We don't have housing. Landlords won't accept our clients and like all of these problems that are real problems. But then they housed 34 people in 1 month. So then they proved to themselves that they can do it. And then they have kept doing it after that and been a lot more creative in some of the things that they've done because they've just been like, well, let's just try. And then they do. I think another one of the things that I want to raise up is that both of these communities have what we call kind of an in-reach team. So we all know outreaches, they like go out, do street outreach and things like that, but they both have folks who are connected directly with service providers and some of those systems of care. And so they have teams that are specifically like going in and forming relationships with their behavioral health folks, their school districts, their foster care, their juvenile detention folks, to make sure that those people know exactly who to call whenever they encounter somebody who's experiencing homelessness or going to be exited into homelessness who they don't have a plan for yet or anything like that. So they can jump in and make sure that that person is not dropped through the system or just exited or anything like that. And so both communities have those systems, and those people are also some of the people who house the most people in their community, oftentimes through HPDF or through case conferencing and using a lot of the vouchers and things like that very creatively are some things that they've been able to do.
That all sounds amazing. I think Neve just put in the chat that surges would be amazing in the youth accommodation space in Perth, and I think it would generate a lot of energy. And yeah, I think the diversion fund is just the flexibility of what you're able to use those funds for is just amazing. Which leads me to our kind of last question around like your priorities for away home. So there's a real focus on prioritising young people of colour and the LGBTQI+ community. Can you tell us a little bit about where that kind of came from and why it's important to you and your communities?
Yeah. Absolutely. I have to shout out one of my colleagues, Liz Harding-Chow, who is our data and evaluation director and also is originally from Melbourne. And Liz is the one I remember because it was 3 years ago when I started at Away Home Washington. And we had a strategy retreat where Beth Sandor and Mel and Ryan from the Large Scale Change team at Community Solutions were all there, and we all were having a conversation about like, this is a really important value to us. Like we do not want to see reproductions of inequities in the system and pat ourselves on the back, say we're done. And Liz took that and went and she designed a set of disproportionality measures and disproportionality checks on all of the measures that we have, and really spent a lot of time thinking it through, and then brought it to the rest of the organization and pitched it and said, like, we really need to do this. Like, if we say that this is a value, this is how we need to do it. And it changed everything about the Anchor Community Initiative. It changed everything about Away Home Washington, but like, me here, it changed everything about like the way that we coach, because now when we coach, we are not just thinking about like, okay, like we got to make reductions. We are like, okay, like we got to make reductions. And we also have to like look at what is actually happening in the disaggregated data across the systems when it comes to some of this stuff, because we're not only responsible now for reducing the overall number, shortening the length of time, but we're also responsible for repairing some of the harm and the really kind of basic levels of like white supremacy culture and white supremacy reality that our systems are based on. And so even though we have like really firm and strong relationships with like a lot of our state partners, we still run into barriers a lot of the time where people are like, why do you want disaggregated data? What are you going to use it for? Are you going to discriminate against people? Because they're in like a mindset where that information can be used to discriminate. But to us, and our team is a majority queer, like many folks are people of color on our team, and we are really passionate about this. And we're like, if you don't count, if you're invisibilized in this data, then you're not being counted. And we really believe that we need to be able to see the information. We need to be able to see the problem and pinpoint it so that communities can use it to improve. And so it has not been easy, but we have really amazing coaches who have spent the last couple of years designing lots of new coaching tools to be able to help communities like focus in on like, if you aren't collecting sexual orientation data across your system, for example, like what changes might you have to make in order to like really uplift young people, queer young people, so they want to answer that question truthfully, and that your staff are able to like ask those questions. Can we like help with best practices and design some things? We have a SOGI data collection toolkit that has been really useful. We're doing a training on in a couple weeks. We have an inclusion criteria tool that organizations can use to assess their services. We also support every community to have a youth action board, and we really encourage them to listen to young people about these things, because a lot of times it's harder for service providers to really look at their information and think about what they do, and to get over the feeling of like, I'm not racist. But the thing is that in our systems, nobody has to be a racist for the system to be racist. And so for us, I think it's really important to like center and listen to young people when they're saying how this is impacting them, and specifically centering young people of color and queer young people in that conversation, because they're the ones who know. They know why, and they'll say it if we give them the opportunity and the space to do that. And so this has been a huge learning opportunity, and a huge opportunity for us to push state systems, to push local systems, and our communities care and want to make changes so much. And they're doing it every single day.
Amazing. That was in time, Ashley. Well done. Thank you very much. Like, just some of the stuff that the communities are doing is just amazing, and I could talk to you all day and try and glean all of the information that I can. But I'm going to stop talking and let other people ask some questions, if there is any questions at the moment.
Yeah, and I'll say, as we're looking for that, we are doing a deep dive on Walla Walla's improvements. You can hear from the Walla Walla team. It's in the morning. I don't know what the time difference exactly is. It's in the morning our time, but I'm going to drop the Eventbrite in case anybody wants to hear from Walla Walla people about their reductions.
Fantastic.
We got a question from Neve at Vinnie's. She says, Ashley, what does the youth accommodation sector look like in Washington? Are they separated in crisis or transitional, that is time-limited services? is there a focus on public housing for youth? You know, the notion of forever home.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, and I'm gonna try my brain to translate it into US language. And so I hope that I'm answering this correctly. But at least in Washington State, so, you know, we have time limited services. A lot of times those are transitional housing and host homes that are kind of the two main opportunities that are like kind of physical locations. And I think there's a lot of emphasis on using host homes, especially in rural environments and also in like school communities and things like that. There's permanent supportive housing. And I think in some communities where there are more young people who are experiencing chronic homelessness, and so on the street for really long periods of time. So like in Seattle, in Pierce County is one of our communities, those kind of places. There's some permanent supportive housing, I think, for young people. There are young people who live in encampments and things like that as well. And we have a situation of, I don't know, we are having like a whole conversation, I think, as many places in the US are having, about like permanent encampments and designated encampments, and those being safe or unsafe for young people, and all of those kinds of questions, because there's sanctioned and unsanctioned. And I think in Pierce County, in one of our communities, one of the things that they have done recently is work with their housing authority to develop a housing project, an affordable housing project that has on-site services and case management. It's called Arlington Drive, and it has 50 units for young people who have experienced homelessness. And so that project, the thing about that project is it's great, and we should all have more affordable housing. One of the things I didn't say about some of our communities is that we had a lot of COVID rental assistance, and the communities that were easier to access the COVID rental assistance saw less inflow when the eviction moratorium in the US ended. And so that was really useful. But Arlington Drive, once it got full, then everybody was like very excited about it, but then it was full. And so, yeah, now we need more. And I think there is like a really big push on rapid rehousing as a strategy, and a lot of feelings like, I don't know, rapid rehousing is not perfect, rapid rehousing for youth, but it feels like it's hard for people to like think about how we could house young people outside of rapid rehousing, even though it's kind of like, you know, sometimes it's rapid, sometimes it's not so rapid, and sometimes you enroll like 17 people into it and only house one of them. And yeah, so there's like some translating between how it works for adults and how it works for young people that is still getting worked out, I think.
Are there any other questions for anyone? One from Courtney asking, what sort of housing were the WAAEH team able to find for the 34 young people? Did this include youth accommodation, private rentals, relationship building with homeowners, knowing that the rental market is so difficult?
Yeah, that is a really, really great question. So I think WAAEH has one of the tightest rental markets in the state. Just across the board. And that was one thing that they had been pointing to. And so a lot of the clients who were served by this program, I remember one of the navigators, she individually housed 19 people in 1 month, just herself. She's amazing. Her name's Alicia Pritchett. And I remember her saying, like, you know, it was a challenge and I wanted to win. And so I know all of the rental agencies and the landlords around WAAEH. Like, I know them all. I know what their criteria is. I know if they're going to accept my client or not. I know already. But during this challenge, I submitted the application anyways. And then she submitted the application anyways. And then a bunch of people got accepted to apartments that she didn't think that they were going to get accepted for. And that like unlocked something for her that I always like go back to, of one of these things of like, oh my gosh, like you just had to try, and like you were the one that was in your own way. And so that push just to try was one thing that really helped. So a lot of people got into their own accommodations, own apartments. Some people were housed with family or friends. And so, you know, it can pay for things like we can pay rent to your grandma for like whatever, or we can like pay car repair costs if your grandma lives like on the like in Burbank, which is on the other side of Walla Walla County. She lives out there, but you're going to school out here and you need a car so that you're able to do that. Otherwise, you can't live with your grandma because it's not going to work and you're gonna have to drop out of school. We can pay for the car repairs if that's going to make grandma's house viable, right? So like they got extremely creative with solutions in that kind of a way. To really dig in to what was going to keep people housed. One of the things they also said is that there was a lot of issues with COVID at the time, and people in their dorms and a lot of international students who were not able to work, but were not able to necessarily like stay in their dorms that they were in when they were in college, because Walla Walla is a college town. And so when we think about disproportionality and we think about people who like, I don't know, drop out from under the radar, that's one of the things that that they were thinking about. I think in Washington State, it's also a thing where like if we separate people by populations, then young people, oftentimes it's easier for them to access services if they separate from their families. And so if they're over the age of 18, they're technically an adult, but they want to stay with their mom, but their mom is homeless too. Like it makes more sense for you to separate. And that's not what we want. We want people to be together. So that's one of the things that I really like love about this, because this can house, like if you're a young parent, can house you and all your kids and your partner and everyone. It can keep you and your whole family housed. It can do a lot of those kinds of creative things too.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Ashley. I think that's all we've got time for before we dive into updates from everybody else, but feel free to stick around. I'm sure that after today you will be contacted by other people, but I will share the resources that you've shared with me, and I'll keep this conversation going. But thank you very much for your time and for staying up late to talk to us.
Thanks so much, Ashley. As Michaela said, I'm sure there's a lot of learnings that we can take and adapt here in Western Australia from the amazing work that you're doing. So it was really great to hear a bit more about it. And thanks, Michaela, for supporting the discussion and managing the chat. So now I'd like to just pass it over to Jacqui Herring from the Office of Homelessness in the Department of Communities to provide a bit of an update on the work that they're doing in the space.
Cool. Thanks, Stefan. And thank you, Ashley. That was a most inspiring, energetic and enthusiastic presentation. I got a lot out of it, and particularly as the Office of Homelessness is about to embark upon a commissioning process, I think there's lots in there that we can take from to be able to inform the work that we do moving forward. I'd also like to congratulate John and Michaela on their appointments with the WA Alliance, and I'm looking forward very much to working with both of you around how we progress not only the commissioning piece, but the whole homelessness issue in WA towards ending homelessness. So really excited to be working with both of you. And I think given that the focus of this conversation is about youth homelessness, I just wanted to reiterate that the Office of Homelessness does definitely understand and appreciate that youth homelessness is different to mainstream homelessness. We know that it needs to be informed by youth lived experience with a focus on developing basic life skills and trauma-informed case management. So I guess what's really exciting about Ashley's presentation, as I said, is the fact that we will be able to, hopefully use some of their ideas. And I must say, I love the idea of the diversion fund. So maybe we can convince the powers that be that that's something we could do with here in WA. But I guess what we have ahead of us is an opportunity to look at how we do youth homelessness, or how we prevent youth homelessness and address youth homelessness differently from mainstream. And I know Sandy and the YACWA team are about to work on developing a housing first for youth model, which is really important given that youth homelessness is different to mainstream homelessness. So I guess, unfortunately, I had hoped to be able to share a presentation, but it's not quite ready yet. It hasn't been through the normal government approval processes. But I guess within the commissioning process that we will be progressing with, we will be having some dedicated sessions on youth specifically. So we make sure that we get the voices of lived experience youth, the voices of youth homelessness services, to ensure that our youth homeless system fits within the broader system, but it has its own attention to focus on what youth actually need to progress their housing aspirations. We recognise that the provision of youth services requires a different approach and an understanding of where the youth homelessness system interacts with the broader system and how it differs from the broader system. We will be running an extensive series of sector co-working days, which we're hoping we'll be able to announce very soon, that will focus on different areas of the homeless service continuum. And while a focus on youth will be maintained throughout these sessions, we'll also have some dedicated sessions that will exclusively focus on youth homelessness. So making sure that it's not only considered outside of that broader system, but within the system as well, because it doesn't operate exclusively outside of it. And as part of this process, we will engage with funded and unfunded youth services and work with these services to engage young people with lived experience because their voice is so very important, as Ashley pointed out, to ensure that we are hearing their voices and the unique situations that they find themselves in. I had the privilege of, unfortunately, not participating in the whole walk, but the walk that the Department of Communities had or participated in on Wednesday ended up at Passages, and I was able to get to the Passages session, and thank you, Neve, for your insights about how Passages works and the importance of elevating the youth voice. But what was really wonderful was the ability to listen to a young lady who was very impressive. And she shared her story and the many, many challenges that she experienced is in that youth system, in the child protection system, because we know that part of the challenges for many youth actually relate to their experience in the child protection system and those people that are at risk. So what was really wonderful was to be able to share, for her to actually share her story. And I guess what it really reinforced to me is the importance of ensuring that our systems join up, because she had experienced a situation in the child protection system. Obviously, the benefit of the Department of Communities now is that we have child protection, we have housing, we have homelessness, and it's about how we get that system to work together for the benefit of the individuals that we're trying to support. So I guess for me, a little bit like Michaela, it's really exciting right now. So yeah, so it is really exciting, I think, because we really do have an opportunity with a very passionate minister, with the creation of the Office of Homelessness, collectively, and I think Ashley mentioned this in terms of partnerships being the key to making a difference. We really do have an opportunity to progress and achieve our aspiration of ending homelessness and preventing homelessness and again, I think Ashley mentioned this, because essentially what we want to do is prevent young people from becoming homeless and then getting into that system of adult homelessness in the future. So that was a bit of a ramble introduction, and I'm just so excited by Ashley's presentation. So really looking forward to looking and working with Ashley in the future, hopefully, but also particularly John and Michaela about how we can progress ending homelessness in WA. So you're happy to also take any questions. So I'm conscious we are running out of time.
Thanks, Jacqui. Yeah, are there any questions? Probably have time for 1 or 2 questions if there's any for Jacqui before we move on.
If not, I might just, because this was a great question that was in the chat and it might be beneficial for everybody to know. So just Neve put a question in just to Ashley around her wanting to hear about the case management ratio between per youth worker in Washington, and do youth navigators work with young people time limited? Ashley, I don't know if you want to come off mute and just answer that rather than me reading out your text.
Yeah, totally. Well, and what I probably didn't have the most satisfying answer because it's a little bit based on contract. It's a little bit based on the particular agency and like what the purposes are. But I think in most cases, people have like, you know, between 20 and 30 folks on their caseload. But that's not necessarily inclusive, right? Like that is varying based on like a lot of different factors. I used to work at an agency called Youth Care, and we had CSEC case managers, commercially sexually exploited children. Case managers, their caseload was like 6 or 7, very intensive and very high levels of support. Whereas some folks, the scope of what they need or the scope of what they offer in particular is like pretty specific and like later touch point and that kind of a thing. I think the thing about the navigator positions that I referenced when I was talking about like the InReach team, and it's like the youth engagement team are the 2 names of the 2 teams, but they function in some similar ways that are really interesting. The thing about those ones is that they really see themselves as agents of the system. Like they are workers for the system. They're not necessarily like have their first allegiance to like their agency. Like they love their agency, they work for their agency, all of that stuff. But they're like, my job is to help end youth homelessness. My job isn't to just do whatever it says in my job description or whatever. Like I'm going to do what I need to do to end youth homelessness. And like that, they see their job as like doing that. And so I think the more folks in the system that can see these young people as our young people, because there's like a thing that sometimes happens where it's like, these are my young people because they're on my caseload. And that makes it hard for communities to like collaborate and work together. But when we're like, this is our young people, we are all on deck to work with all of them. And we need to like organize ourselves in terms of like what is going to make the most difference for these young people that we're talking about right now. I think that's really the most useful thing is like when people see themselves as accountable to young people first, accountable to each other first, and then accountable to their contract. The Office of Homeless Youth contracts also like account for up to a year, I think, of aftercare services that people can bill for. So after people have been permanently housed, if they need something else, usually there's some flexibility in agencies being able to bill under those contracts. The federal contracts are like a little bit more complicated with some of those kinds of things.
Thanks, Ashley.
Thanks, Ashley, for jumping back in there. And thanks, Jacqui, so much for your presentation. It's really exciting to hear the department's interest and keenness to progress and work on youth homelessness. And I know YACWA is very much looking forward to supporting you to do that. We've got a little bit of time left. So I'm just going to jump in and give a brief update on some of the work that YACWA will be doing in this space, and some of the opportunities that we're going to be having for people to have more input as well. So we've just got 2 projects that are coming underway in the next couple of months, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But these projects, the aim of them are to forward YACWA's advocacy goals as the peak body for young people and youth services in WA, and attempt to foster a whole of community approach to addressing youth homelessness, which we're hoping to have, which we hope will lead to resource-specific programs that focus on early intervention and access to secure housing for young people. As Jacqui said, we know that a one-size-fits-all approach to ending homelessness does not work if we don't take into account the unique needs of young people who are experiencing homeless. As we know that many of the drivers of youth homelessness are very different to the broader adult population. And so if we don't have a specific suite of programs focused on young people from early intervention all the way through to crisis support, and also types of housing and that intensive case management that comes along with it. If we don't have that specific approach, then we know that we won't achieve this goal for young people, and we won't end homelessness in the long term. We'll only be creating future generations of entrenched rough sleepers, which we really don't want to do. So with this in mind, as I said, we've got 2 key projects that we'll be getting underway, and we hope these will assist the department communities and work closely with the youth sector to inform and drive action to prevent and end youth homelessness, and to support young people to access secure housing and maintain independent living. So the first project that Michaela mentioned earlier is the Housing First to Youth Research Project, where we are employing a project officer to bring together young people, the youth sector, and other experts in the space to understand what a real Housing for Youth program looks like, and what works best in Western Australia. So we'll be undertaking a review of the international and national best practice literature, and engaging both the youth sector and young people with lived experience of homelessness. And this includes pulling together a small working group to collaboratively develop the parameters of the project and also the consultation workshops. And then we will be holding one of these consultation workshops later this year. And this will then inform the development of a final report and guide, which we hope will kind of flesh out this concept of housing for youth in a WA context, and hopefully support future implementation of this approach in WA. And we will be sharing this and working closely with the sector and the department as we have that final report. So that's that first project. The second project is around re-establishing the Youth Homelessness Advisory Council, which was a 8-person council made up of young people with lived experience of homelessness, which was last active in 2019, and had a crucial role in supporting the development of the WAAEH Alliance End Homelessness Youth Homelessness Action Plan, which was a whole of community approach to ending homelessness. And so they were so crucial, and their voices were so valuable in that experience. And we were very fortunate to receive funding to recommence that project from the Assistant John and God. So we're employing a project coordinator, a YACWA lived experience support officer, and 8 committee members over the next couple of months, and they will be having we hope to support them with professional developments and guidance to have input into youth homelessness service design and policy development, both YACWA's advocacy and also opportunities to engage with state government and department communities, conducting service audits, and building from the service safaris that they did last time, which we know were quite effective in helping some services to receive feedback and make some changes. And community engagements and community advocacy, leading campaigns around sharing their voice and their lived experience with the broader community to increase understanding of youth homelessness. Because we know that young people's voices are often underrepresented in this discussion, and also underrepresented when it comes to broader strategic policy. So we're hoping to really reinforce how invaluable their voices and experiences are, and how they should be listened to as experts in their own needs. And so we're really excited to have the YAC back again, and I'm really looking forward to working with them and updating you all as we start to recruit. So as I said, yeah, we'll make sure we keep everyone posted with the details of these projects. If you sign up to our e-news on our website and keep across our social media, and I'm sure we'll be having more of these conversations involving the state government and the community sector and the broader community as we move forward. And we hopefully can learn from other projects internationally, such as Ashley's, and move forward in our goal to end homelessness in WA. That's all from me, unless there's anything else from anyone else. We're pretty much perfectly smack bang out of time, which is amazing. Thank you all so much for coming. We really appreciate you giving up your time to be here today. I hope you learned a bit from the presentation. Thank you to all of our panelists and presenters, and we hope to see you all again soon.